debates in our foreign policy. Let's bring in Tom Rogan, columnist at National Review, just wrote a great piece in both Review and the Washington Examiner, and also Nile Gardiner from the Heritage Foundation's Margaret Thatcher Center, correct?
That's correct.
All right, welcome back. Glad to have both of you gentlemen. Tom, to you, much has been made of this election, a huge amount of discussion about what would happen if Marine Le Pen won. She didn't win. Are we essentially in the same spot we were 24 hours ago?
To some degree, I think we are, but it's interesting that the movement she represents, has grown in the sense of where her father was.
Almost double in the vote from his race for president.
So I think the critical element here will be what happens in the next year. Is Emmanuel Macron able to get legislative reforms through the parliament? Of course, parliament's role there is going to be critical when they have elections coming up. And at the same time, is he going to be able to foster this notion of national unity, both counter-terrorism crackdown, because the threat being very significant, but also the idea that people from the French colonies, for example, are able to find more access to work and employability.
Niall, it struck me as you almost heard a little bit of a Kennedy-esque tone to his speech, or his celebration speech, if you will, his victory speech. And at the same time, it's really hard to put these two candidates into left or right. You know, from our perspective, Macron is more right economically, Le Pen is more left economically, Macron is more left socially. It doesn't really fit a traditional American policy, but you think about the things that are important to America from a national security standpoint. Strong on NATO, Macron checks that box. Strong on the EU, that helps the United States economy. Win-win for us?
I think it's very mixed here, and certainly Mr. Macron would like to see himself as the next John F. Kennedy. However, I think that Mr. Kennedy was a man of significantly greater substance than Macron, who has no real achievements to speak of. He spent a couple of years, of course, as a minister under Francois Hollande's administration, and Francois Hollande's administration was absolutely disastrous on the economic front. So I think that you will see, of course, a pragmatic relationship between Washington and Paris over the next few years, but there are going to be some significant ideological differences between President Trump and President Macron.
Well, and these gentlemen are all going to be together in what, 2 or 3 weeks, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be meeting up over in Europe, and it's going to be an interesting dynamic in the sense that President Trump quite clearly favoured Marine Le Pen to win. We can read very clearly into his tweets, his comments. But at the same time, I do think on ISIS, Macron will be wanting to play, but because of his belief in the American orbit, NATO, the European Union, as Niall mentions, I think there will be an effort by Macron to show, look, I'm tough on counter-terrorism.
Yeah, he mentioned terrorism 3 or 4 times in his speech, right?
Expect increase, for example, French special operations deployments alongside the United States. But at the same time, what is going to happen in terms of President Trump's willingness to placate the European Union, which Macron is very much in favor of?
How dangerous, Niall, is it we heard from Tom about the support for Marine Le Pen? 11 million people voted for somebody who is, for all intent and purposes, a nationalist anti-Semite who wanted to cozy up to Russia and get out of NATO. In Paris, we're watching huge crowds who are extraordinarily excited about Macron's victory. But there's 11 million people who, at least in France, who aren't excited about that and really there's a deep divide in that country.
Yeah, I think there is a deep-seated rejection among millions of French people of the political establishment. Monsieur Macron was seen as the representative of that establishment in the second round, and without a doubt, I think there's deep-seated unhappiness with the state of the economy in France, with the rising Islamist terror threat, and also, of course, with French immigration policy. All of these are going to be immense challenges for Mr. Macron over the next 5 years. And at the moment, he's really just outlined perhaps some sort of grand vision, but there isn't a lot of substance to that vision. So I expect it's going to be a pretty rough ride for Macron over the next few years.
Yeah, we heard even his spokesman at the beginning, Benjamin Haddad, we had on, sort of allude to them understanding that this candidacy came out of nowhere a year ago, and they have got a lot to do to fulfill those promises, and serious questions that they know exist as to whether or not they can. At least it'll be a lot of stuff for you guys to write about. All right, gentlemen, good to have you on. As this continues, which it certainly will, Tom and I will have you guys back.
Great.
All right,
Thank you very
awesome. Liz?
All right, great debate. As the Macron campaign celebrates a victory, Republicans here in Washington did some celebrating of their own after passing that long-promised health care legislation in the House. But Democrats